Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to the Hoon, where co-host Peter Bale and I go around the week's news in geopolitics and Aotearoa's political economy with a whole bunch of experts, academics and politicians, all to understand our worlds better and have some fun. Tēnā koe, ngā mihi, e te iwi, welcome in. It's great to see you. Thank you very much for the glass of water to Lynn Grevison. I'm Bernard Hickey, co-host, along with Peter Bale, co-host, on a sunny
we're like
spring
a smoothly
day.
oiled machine, aren't we, Bernard? Really?
Oh, we're just, straight into
there's
it.
nobody walking in off camera. Nobody can see the crap in my little office room.
You can see this is authentic. This is real.
It's real.
This is not AI.
It most certainly is real. Yeah, to the point of desperation. Yeah. So what have you been up to this week, Bernard? I saw you last Friday at a journalists' drinks event, which reminded me of virtually every slightly sad farewell I'd had in any part of my long life as a journalist. How was it for you?
Lovely to see everyone. It was nice to see some humans. I'm one of these hermits who is happy in my happy place, going for a swim every day and pumping out a gazillion bytes of content. And it's good to meet some other humans, particularly journos. I'm from that tribe, and essentially I'm never happier than when I'm in a newsroom. And there aren't many newsrooms around these days, so it's really good to just hang out with other
Well, the
journos.
newsroom's atomized into many newsrooms. I mean, in a sense, my place is a newsroom, your place is a newsroom.
Yeah. And the kaka is as well. There's a chat section which is a bit like that. And we love it. It's great. Because journos aren't always that popular these days, I think.
Well, we're not going to move to that one just yet, Bernard, because
okay.
if you remember the script that I just sent you before, that you just completely going over like a steamroller, I'll tell you what I've been doing, which is Business Desk. I helped them with a project this week to choose the CEO of the year in New Zealand, which was to run about an 8-week process where the Business Desk, this is Patrick Smelly's operation, the Business Desk team came up with, I think, 72 chief executives, from which we whittled it down to about 25, which then a team of judges whittled down further. And what was kind of interesting in it, and I think it's symptomatic of New Zealand and actually really important, because we did the public sector as well as listed companies, the classic listed companies, and private companies and startups. So it was a really good melange, and it also reflected kind of the state of the New Zealand economy, or the shape of the New Zealand economy, where despite the move away from Wellington to some extent, you've still got incredible influence of the public sector on the economy. And so it was kind of interesting that the person who won the public sector award was a woman called Christine Stevenson, who runs New Zealand Customs. And she sounds terrific. Very few people would ever have seen her. Certainly fewer heard of her. And I think something's happened, Bernard, in the sort of many years since I used to cover Wellington, is we know fewer of our civil servants than we used to, or they have a lower profile, and the ministers carry much more of that profile. Brian Roche was in the list, but Christine Stevenson won the public sector one. The overall winner was Richard Taylor from Weta Workshop, which was kind of interesting. They were all judged on a set of criteria, so not just turn and turn about. And the criteria were about impact, vision, resilience, innovation, and influence. And weirdly, I got ChatGPT to help me put those together, because I got them to compare virtually all of the equivalent kind of awards around the world. So anyway, Richard Taylor from Weta came out on top. It's worth having a look at, because some of the people are really quite interesting. People who from business. Mr. Briscoe's was there. Lots of familiar people. Mark Todd. But it's quite interesting seeing their stories. And also, there's a book recommendation from all of them as well. Which is
were there any that stood out, or said,
Hitchhiker's Guide from the Guide to the Galaxy was a couple. I think Mark Todd suggested Donna Tartt, which was kind of good. And Brian Roach suggested anything by Joe Nesbo, the Norwegian thriller writer.
Ah,
So,
oh
and of
yeah.
course, since I sometimes work in a bookshop, you're welcome to come and visit me in Novel on Sunday, and I'll sell you as many of them as I can.
Ah, good stuff, Joe
And so back to
Nesbo.
the back to the so back to the why people don't like journalists. Um, you wanted to talk about, Bernard, the rather extraordinary remarks yesterday by Donald Trump sitting next to MBS Mohammed bin Salman, or Mr. Bonesaw, in the Oval Office, where Mohammed bin Salman was asked in the open press conference by an ABC journalist who was derided as fake news about the murder and then dividing up, dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And Trump said that a lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. Things happen. But he, i.e. MBS, knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. And of course, I mean, MBS, to his great credit, of course, it was embarrassing, it was difficult. To his great credit, he said, this was a huge mistake and it will never happen again. So at least, and that's been cut out of most of the edits of it. So at least that was said, but it was a very cynical.
He was acknowledging that he knew that it had happened.
Correct.
And that
Well,
he was responsible.
he didn't acknowledge that he was responsible, but he was aware of it.
It was
I mean,
done on Saudi soil.
well, yes. I mean, the one the bits that always got me was the cooking of many of his meteor remains in the tandoori oven of the Istanbul consulate, and then the throwing out of the window of his hands on the way across the Mediterranean or across the Red Sea to Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of gruesomeness there.
Yeah.
And of course
The
we
thing
had
that
this. Sorry, Bernard, go ahead.
The thing that struck me about that exchange is that it perfectly encapsulated everything that's just plain awful about Trump in a couple of ways. Firstly, his just casual acknowledgement that it was okay to murder journalists. Secondly, his main concern that effectively someone in the press corps was embarrassing one of his guests. That was
Yes.
his, you're making me look bad, was his
Yeah.
basic line.
Yeah, well, it's a very difficult situation on that. And of course, we've also had on the extraordinary flight that he took back from Mar-a-Lago to Washington, where he reversed ferreted on the Epstein files and agreed to release them. He addressed another pesky reporter from Bloomberg as "quiet piggy." So we're really at the and then Bernard, on the economics level, I think it's Artie Farty, is telling us not to talk too much about Trump today. He's going to be stuffed on that one. But I do want to come back to the importance of realpolitik when we have Professor Robert Patman on. But today also, Bernard, and I sent you this line. Trump talked about firing Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary's ass, if he didn't get rid of.
So that was the
Reserve
actual
Secretary
quote,
Jerome
wasn't
Powell.
it? He
Yeah.
actually used,
Yeah,
want
I'm
to
going to fire
his
your ass if you don't
ass."
fire his ass. It's just gruesome. So anyway, it's a sophisticated world, and it's worth looking at if people have it. The Guardian, Jody Ginsburg, former Reuters journalist, now head of this committee to protect journalists, described this as a new low and abject low for a president who's made little secret of his contempt for the truth or for the press. Anyway, it's worth reading her piece.
Yeah, I mean, I get what Artie Farty's saying, and I've spent a good chunk of the last 7 years doing everything I can to screen out that asshole's news vomit, which just makes us all miserable and desolate. But he is the leader of the so-called free world, and it affects us all day, every day, and he just sets new lows, and you just can't ignore it.
Well, that's right, and especially when it
everyone's
cuts
got to
across
push
your transom or comes into your wheelhouse. And if the waves come into your wheelhouse, then you're really in trouble. So it's okay for them to dip over your transom, but this stuff with Scott Bessent today is going to move the markets big time, I would say.
Yeah, he has been saying things like that, but just the sheer awfulness of it, and it's quite tight. There's due to be a decision soonish, and it's up in the air about whether or not we do get a rate cut, and it's really important because we could go into the year with no Fed rate cut, only a small rate cut in New Zealand, and the government's hopes of a spring summer housing market bounce that propels the government back into power next year, maybe maybe in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And
And let's, before we finish the show today, just touch on whether we're going into a phony election campaign in New Zealand already. Just to give you the running list, everybody, we've got Dr. Catherine Dyer coming on shortly to talk about the slow reneging. We've got Professor Patman coming on a little bit after that to talk about realpolitik and the fresh threats from the US to Ukraine to force them to give in to some of the Russian demands. We're going to do domestic affairs, Bernard, a bit more on climate, in fact, in domestic affairs about
and cars.
And I think you might do a little soliloquy towards the end, might you not, Mr. Leaf?
Mr. Leaf,
owner?
yeah, Mr. Leaf owner, yes. I'm very happy to do a soliloquy on quite a few things, so that I'm in a zone to do that.
In a zone,
the sun is shining.
Excellent. Dr. Dyer,
yes,
as it were.
Catherine, lovely to see you. I hope you're well.
Yeah, you too. Good,
Yeah,
thanks. And you?
Yeah, it's been another big week in climate and climate policy news. It really is at the centre of everything, I think, in a way that perhaps it didn't used to be. And it's great to see that, these issues around, for example, clean car standards and the politics of climate are really, people are taking notice. I think in particular of Australia, where actually the political debate in Australia has really been about the climate for the last 20 years. It's wrecked the National Liberal Party alliance. And just in the last week, finally, the Liberal Party has bailed out of its net zero agreement, and in part because Pauline Hanson's party, One Nation, which is an anti-immigration party, which also, of course, is anti-climate action, is only a few percentage points behind the National Liberal Party coalition. It's really coming up on the rails, reform-like in the Australian political environment. So it's happening, and we can sort of see it too in our politics with Winston Peters on the rise. Catherine, could you tell us a bit more, though, about this news we got this week from Chris Bishop and the Prime Minister on Monday about the clean car standards and what this says about where the government's headed?
Yeah, so this week they have put forward a plan to slash the penalties that apply under the clean car standards by almost 80%, I think. And so what that means is more polluting cars coming in, basically. And this all dates back. This is the third tinkering that they've done with the clean car standards. And right from the time that they came into, this government came in, they had all those kind of climate kill bills right when they came into power, and amongst them was the clean car discount, so the EV subsidies. So they got rid of that straight away. And then they made a change to the clean car standard that would allow the minister to tinker with it in the future, which is exactly what he's been doing. So that was one of the early changes. But one of the effects of getting rid of the EV subsidy is it had immediate impacts on the clean car standard, because you take away those subsidies and suddenly the importers, both demand and supply dried up. So, the sales of EVs in the country tanked. But also then they had trouble finding cheap enough cars to bring in because the subsidy was no longer being applied. So that has continued all the way along to create problems for the clean car standard, which then makes them have to keep tinkering with it to keep up with the problems. And it is frustrating because it just shows that, what we had in place before the coalition government came into power was a whole policy platform around transitioning the transport industry, or transitioning vehicles towards clean energy, and you needed every part of that for it to work. So when you could start swiping out bits of the policy, the other bits stopped working as well. So the first time they reduced the penalties in the clean car standard, that was to align with Australia. And Australia was just bringing in a new regulation, and they had already been lobbied heavily by petrol and diesel car companies to reduce their standard. So we reduced to be at the same as them. But Australia kept a lot of EV subsidies and other, clean car subsidies and incentives in place, or incentives rather than subsidies. But, so they're kind of at that level, their policy has more chance of being stable than ours does at the moment.
Yeah, and it's
So it's just that policy incoherency
Yeah,
across
and we're
the
not
board
working.
that we
We
keep
don't seem to
talking
be
about.
working towards anything, Catherine.
Yeah, and we're constantly responding to the consequences of the meddling that happened in the first place, So it's incoherent. We don't seem to have a clear target of where we're headed, and they just keep tinkering with things, and so there's no stability, and it points towards a chaotic late transition because we're not getting anything done, So overall, it's bananas.
And also, it's trashing the market mechanisms that have been created and that were consulted with industry and agreed. So, this clean car standards is not like some sort of green policy applied from on high that everyone hated. This was done in consultation with the industry. It's actually quite a clever piece of policy making where you essentially try to create a system where the buyers of dirty cars help subsidise the buyers of clean cars, and that you get, in theory, a fiscally neutral approach where the government and taxpayers at large don't have to subsidise clean car buying. Effectively, it's the dirty buyers subsidising the clean buyers. Now, as it turned out, there was such strong demand for the clean cars that there was something of a fiscal subsidy. The taxpayers at large did have to pay a bit extra, but it did mean we had this massively strong start to adoption of electric vehicles to the point where we were doing much better than Australia. And then, of course, the bonfire of the climate policies came through. It died just dead in the water. It really caused all sorts of grief for the used and new car import industry. So a whole bunch of businesses went out of business. And as we'll hear later on today in the show, the business sector was sideswiped, didn't love what had happened. And the market mechanisms failed. It's interesting to see, I don't know if you've seen, but the carbon price again collapsed this week and is now, I think, under $40 a tonne. This compares with $160 a tonne for the proper carbon markets in Europe, for example. It's just extraordinary.
Yep, it's just incoherent. We don't have a clear goal. So we have this fuzzy kind of soft renege on our Paris Agreement standards. We have all these bits and pieces of things being taken out of the architecture, which then causes other bits of it not to work, which then causes, consequences that they have to respond to all the time. It's frustrating to watch, and it will end up costing New Zealanders. There is so much analysis that has been done. If every country in the world has to transition to zero carbon dioxide emissions at some point, otherwise the situation just keeps getting worse, right? So every country in the world has to have its own transition, and the cheapest transition is one that is long and slow and steady. If you delay and create chaos, and all that does is it makes it more expensive. So the costs keep piling up further out, and it means that we will have more of the consequences, because this is happening in other countries as well. We get more of the consequences of climate change at the same time as we're still trying to transition. That is the worst case scenario and the most expensive case scenario.
It's interesting, though, how many voters have this incredibly short-term view, which is right now the price of my double cab ute is going up because of this thing, and I just will not accept that at all. I don't want any change in my lifestyle, even if I understand the science and agree with it. Someone else should pay. It shouldn't be me. Peter, you mentioned an extraordinary exchange involving Mike Hosking this week and Chris Bishop, which I hadn't heard about, and which, even for Mike Hosking, is the thing. Can you talk about that?
Well, as you know, we don't really like to mention Mike Hosking because he's quite an important competitor to us. I mean, our daily show.
We're coming up on
on the rails, as it were. But there was a really good exchange between him and Chris Bishop about this, and not unreasonably, to my mind, in a sense. But Hosking said, "Look, I'm the punter. I've got the money. I know when I want to buy what I want to buy as a car. car I drive to work in this morning's a V8, and I like driving the V8, and that's what I do. So you can import what you want. I'm going to buy what I want, and that's your conundrum, isn't it? And he pointed out, well, he said, what other government law prevents us buying what we want to buy, other than, I mean, he didn't actually mention guns, but he was essentially saying that,
what about cars that have no seatbelts and no brakes?
What are you intervening in on here? And it led to, I think Chris Bishop drives two Nissan Leafs.
He'll have one each for himself and his wife, which is perfectly reasonable. They are beautiful cars. They cost nothing to run.
But I mean, that is the point, in a way, that if you're David Seymour, for example, who is increasingly influential, it would appear, they don't want to intervene in a way, that pisses off the double cab ute driver, the best-selling vehicle in New Zealand, amazingly. And, there is this freedom of choice aspect.
Yeah, and you can see how it is being played out in politics. When you look at the table that came out with the announcement from Chris Bishop on Monday, showing the savings for particular brands of cars. So it turns out there is a saving on when you buy a Ford Ranger for about $315, which I was surprised it wasn't a lot more. But there are some other cars where the savings are extraordinary. For example, the Ford Everest Platinum, which is this big honking, 3-ton behemoth,
Monster,
four-wheel drive with a 3-litre diesel engine, you're going to save, because of these changes, $6,825 on that vehicle, which, a whole bunch of Mike Hosking listeners will go, oh, brilliant, $6,000. And what I'd say back to them, you go. Yep.
Sorry, I was just going to say on the freedom of choice, thing. There's some really good work being done by Jess Berenson Shaw around framing, and she's basically talking about the fact that when you talk about that freedom to buy the biggest road hog that you can, you are depriving other people of their freedoms to get around safely from one place to another. And this is often non-drivers, which happen to be our youngest and oldest people in our population. So their freedom to get quickly and safely from one place to another, it's been, impacted by this car-centric culture, and also the pollution from that increases our healthcare costs, and that leads to a whole lot of illnesses and a whole lot of early mortality. In fact, air pollution is one of the leading causes of early mortality globally. So, their freedom to do something is depriving other people of their freedom to live their lives in a way that most people would want to. So that whole argument, I think really needs to be tackled a lot more. Some of us want freedom from the after effects of those people driving those big, gas guzzling, polluting vehicles around our neighbourhoods.
That's exactly right. And particularly too, when you want to absent yourself from society and a collective decision to do something, don't be surprised when you need help from society to deal with a crisis of your own that you don't get it. So when Mike Hosking, says, stuff the rest of you, I'm going to buy my V8 and drive it however I like, I've got the freedom. Well, when there's a storm that takes out his batch, don't expect the rest of us to bail him out. And this is the thing, when you decide that everyone's an individual in this place and no one needs help from anyone else, that's just not true. Humans, we have to work together or we'll get eaten by the lions.
Yeah, and what they're really asking
I think
for,
Mike
those people
sees
who
himself
make
as a lion. That's the issue here.
Yeah, what they're really asking for, those people, is they want the decisions to be made by the people who have the most power, because those people are most like them. And so that's just a decision to impose their will on the rest of us, and not about freedom at all.
Catherine, that is a fantastic segue into.
Thank
you
you,
can
Catherine.
stay. That's a fantastic segue into Professor Robert Patman, Dr. Dyer. Professor Patman, how are you? We've decided that we want to start on a kind of realpolitik view of the world. We started the show part of the show with a bit of a conversation about Trump's comments about the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. And
it had nothing to do with
and that it had nothing to do with, despite the US intelligence reports that say quite the opposite. And of course, then to his great credit, in my view, to some extent, Mr. Bonesaw did in fact acknowledge the killing and said it would never happen again.
Sad mistake.
Yes, but we've got a couple of realpolitik things that I wanted to raise with you, and it's a little bit like Bernard doing doing a video as the skateboarding dog on a podcast. But we both read a piece I sent you about from Philippe Sands, the human rights lawyer, talking about
Yeah, excellent piece.
the challenges to, and we will put it in the show notes, or I'll flick it up onto the chat here. But it's about this question that you raise all the time, and I believe your book must be just about to come out, about the importance of laws and international laws to the world order. And then today again we've got Mr. Bonesaw, then Saudi Arabia, an alleged $21 trillion that Trump has brought in. It's all about money. And then we've got a story I also sent you, a Reuters exclusive, suggesting that there's fresh pressure on Zelensky to both give up territory and reduce the size of the military in Ukraine. Just let's have a little spurt from you, if you don't mind, on about realpolitik and this kind of might is right we're seeing in so many stories.
Yeah, I just take up the Ukraine situation for a moment. Mr. Putin approached the administration this week because he's on the road. So he's playing Trump. The interesting thing here is every time Putin gets really distressed, he turns to the administration, and Trump immediately drops everything and says, what can we do to help? He's been hurt by the sanctions the US has put in place. And every night, the Russians are taking collateral damage. Their energy infrastructure is getting wrecked. Their oil refining capacity is whittling down. This is not actually getting into, I don't like that phrase, the mainstream media, because I think it's conspiratorial. But a lot of this stuff is not getting covered, except, of course, by the excellent work by Professor Phillips O'Brien and people like this. It is really, the tide has turned against Russia in the war. So what Putin is trying to do now is salvage what he can in order not to lose his job and probably his life. And Mr. Trump, let's just consider what Trump is trying to do here. He's trying to lean on Zelensky and say, you should lose territory to end this conflict. That takes no account of the losses the Ukrainians have suffered so far from an illegal invasion. Secondly, it would probably destabilize Zelensky's position within Ukraine. Not that Mr. Trump cares about that. He's far more concerned about the stability of Mr. Putin's position in Russia. But thirdly, Ukraine is actually beginning to get real support. You saw it just signed a deal with the French, started planes arriving in January, state-of-the-art French technology. They've got the Swedish, 150 Swedish, they've got 300 attack aircraft arriving in January. So from Zelensky's point of view, yes, he is getting these awful missile and drone attacks, but Putin is bit by bit losing the capacity to continue this war for too long. There was an excellent, his name escapes me, from a chap from Chatham House, former British diplomat.
Jack Watling?
No. But when it comes to me, I'll send you then put it in the notes. But
Great.
The point to note here was he was arguing that time is not on Russia's side now. And he predicted, ironically, Mr. Putin will be making an approach to Mr. Trump anytime soon to try to stem these I think a lot of people do not realize how dangerous it is for an authoritarian leader when they breach their social contract with their citizens and they can't provide even security in Russia. And the war is really coming home to Russia. I mean, the Ukrainians are launching attacks 1,500 kilometers, hitting strategic sites in Siberia. So this is a crisis. This is a crisis for Putin. And
what did you make, Robert, of the first use or the first acknowledged use this week of ATACMS? And when we talked, I was thinking about this. We've been talking about this for a couple of years now. And remember, there was a huge debate about whether the Americans would supply these ATACMS, which are a missile that delivers, I think,
it's
160 bombers.
The other thing that really strikes me, Peter, is that slowly, well, probably more quickly than many of us realize, Zelensky has reduced Ukraine's dependence on America's heavy weaponry. They still need it, but they've developed the Flamingo, which has a capability, I believe, it's a long-range missile, that the Flamingo can hit Moscow, and it's got a very strong strike power, and also the Neptune has been updated. In fact, they attacked energy infrastructure using a combination of drones and Neptunes. It was devastating. And so what is interesting here is with this infusion of European help, I'm wondering if Zelensky will buckle in the face of Trump's pressure. He's in a very difficult position because if he, as I say, he runs enormous risks agreeing to reward Putin's invasion.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Europeans will be very uncomfortable. Our government should be very uncomfortable with what Trump is proposing, particularly when the perpetrator of the invasion is now facing real problems. In other words, he's beginning to pay you might say a justified price for an unprovoked unilateral invasion.
And Robert, we've had a burst this week of genuine, this time rather than just rumored, genuine corruption scandals. Very, very close to Zelensky. His business partner has had to leave the country in a great hurry, leaving his gold toilet and bidet behind. There's genuine corruption there, which you tend to get in any country at war. But that also, it gives ammunition, does it not, to the skeptics, particularly in the United States, about giving any help to Zelensky.
They will certainly use that, but you have to put it on a par with the scale of corruption in Russia.
Yeah.
Mr. Putin's the reputed, according to the US Treasury, Putin is the wealthiest man in the world. He didn't get that on his presidential salary. And the whole regime was based on a tribute system whereby the government extracts money from billionaires for their privilege to operate within Russia. There's 118 of them who operate on that basis. They have 45% of Russia's wealth. So yes, it is regrettable, but let's be quite clear. Ukraine was a corrupt country when it was illegally invaded by Russia. It would be, it would be defying belief to think that corruption is going to disappear overnight, particularly the opportunities created by foreign assistance. But it's good that Zelensky is trying to address the problem, and he has to. And he made this quite clear. Zelensky made a very candid comment. He said he has no choice to deal with the corruption because he wants Ukraine to be part of the EU. And the EU is very stringent on these sort of things. So, it's rather amusing. Here we have an administration which is pressing a liberal democracy, albeit with corruption. And by the way, I'm sure Ukraine's not the only liberal democracy with corruption. The White House at the moment is not looking squeaky clean.
Yeah.
Well,
It'll be ironic if the United States says that they because of corruption in Ukraine, it is in fact insisting that Mr. Putin, which is much more corrupt, is rewarded by an invasion of Ukraine. I mean, it could happen. It will happen. It will try to happen. I think the Europeans will not be encouraging Zelensky to accept this deal. I may be wrong. Let's be quite clear. If Zelensky did accept this deal, I don't think it will bring the end of the war.
Just
because
pause it.
Too many Ukrainians have died through Putin, and also the Baltic states will not accept the status quo. I mean, even Turkey said anything less than the restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity is unacceptable, and I think that's the view.
And they know that because of their various territorial issues that they would not want to be bullied on. Bernard, you're bursting to come in because I was
just wondering, Robert, just in the last day, as you've mentioned, there's this new 28-point plan cooked up between Trump and Putin, which essentially throws Ukraine under the bus. How is
not for the first time?
No. He's tried a few times now. I mean, how is Europe going to react to this? Is it at some point people are going to say, okay, Trump really is connected to Putin in a strange way we can't understand, and we just need to write him off? Interesting that Marjorie Taylor Greene described the president as essentially working on behalf or for the interests of another power, which he was
I
obviously.
think she was talking about
I think she was
Israel.
talking about Israel in that one,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
But yeah,
I
let's
I
not go
wonder
there.
where does this go from a European point of view?
Well, it's going to be a real test, isn't it? But Trump may have made his own job more difficult because he urged the Europeans to spend more, up to 5%. They may be in a much better position, ironically, 6 months later. Had Mr. Trump not urged them to spend more on defence, they may have been much more receptive. Mr. Trump's insistence that the war is settled on Putin's terms. I'm not sure the Europeans make a big connection between what happens in Ukraine and their own security. The episode, the British in particular, are and the Germans are very concerned about Putin. And there's been drones over Denmark as well. There will be Europeans who applaud. Slovenia, or is it Slovakia? I beg your pardon. Slovakia, Hungary, will probably say, this is a wonderful peace initiative, and they like the idea that Mr. Putin should be basically rewarded for his aggression in Ukraine. But I think many Europeans, certainly those with any memories, will be very uncomfortable about the prospect of Putin getting anything out of this invasion. And you have to, what it does confirm, and this should be taken note of in Wellington, Mr. Trump has no time for the rules-based international order.
Yeah.
So, all this daddy diplomacy with Mr. Trump, well, it's not making much impact. And Mr. Trump is sticking to his vision of international relations being run by a concert of powers, with America at head of the table, assisted by Xi Jinping and Mr. Putin.
And
so,
Robert, just thinking also of this realpolitik aspect. One of the other things we saw today, apart from the looming real estate deals with Saudi Arabia, the various technology transactions that are coming up that will benefit Donald Trump, if not directly, then figuratively. What about this idea that he's confirmed that they're going to sell Saudi Arabia F-35 aircraft? That doesn't entirely make Israel entirely happy.
It makes it very unhappy, and apparently there were quite frantic efforts by AIPAC and other pro-Israeli lobby groups in the United States. There's an unwritten, I think there was actually a written agreement that Israel must always have a qualitative edge over its perceived rivals in the Middle East. Mr. Trump was directly challenged on that, and he said, words to the effect, that he basically thought Saudi Arabia was of comparable caliber to Israel in terms of status of alliance, which I'm sure didn't find very amusing, because he was basically saying in coded language that the Saudi relationship is every bit as important to his administration as the Israeli one. And in cold financial terms, it probably is. I mean, Saudi Arabia, Prince bin Salman is promising more than $1 trillion in investment in the US, and Israel can't compete with that. In fact, it's the other way around, because the United States gives a $4 billion subsidy to Israel at the beginning of the financial year, so it can earn interest on it at the beginning of every financial year. So, the money flows the other way with Israel.
Last question then, Robert, and then hopefully there won't be a last one from Bernard. But is there any possibility, do you think, that this meeting and the F-35s would bring an opening to Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords and recognizing Israel?
No, not according to Prince bin Salman. He said there must be a two-state solution. And by the way, on that issue, I find it baffling that China and Russia abstained in the UN Security Council, which effectively endorsed Trump's peace plan. It's a very interesting move. Maybe they think, maybe they're talking about realpolitik, maybe it ties in with your theme tonight. Maybe they think that the advantages of abstaining and let Trump doing his thing, because both Russia and China, for different reasons, want things from the United States. that they think on this issue, it's better to be flexible, give Mr. Trump his head with his peace plan, and let it fall apart that way.
Yeah. And it's rather notable, but let's not talk about it too much, but rather notable that the lines that have been drawn in Gaza leave an uninhabited coastal strip, which will be prime coastal real estate. Thank you very much, Professor
Thank
Patton.
you.
It's always lovely to see you.
Thank you, Robert. Cheers.
See you. Thank you.
It's time now to welcome in Kirsten Corson, who is the chair of Drive Electric. Welcome into the Hoon, Kirsten.
Thanks for having me. Good to be along.
Yeah, it's been a big week in the world of cars, electric cars, import policies, and of course our entire approach to climate policy. Can you give us a sense of, how you felt when you heard the announcement this week that the government was going to essentially cut, 80% of the Clean Car Standards penalty for people bringing in gas guzzlers?
An immense feeling of disappointment, to be honest, and just frustration, because from our lens, the decision wasn't being made from a financial and an economic point of view.
Yeah, because
put the environment aside.
It's interesting to see how the industry, if you like, because as I understand it, Drive Electric, works with a lot of people in the industry, importers, manufacturers, people who are servicing the sector, trying to grow the sector. There was a lot of, a lot of the capitalists were quite keen on this. So what was the reaction from your members and from around the sector?
Look, I think there's a sense that there's been some big manufacturers that don't have low emission vehicles lobbying spectacularly hard to the government to make this change. And so they can sell dirtier vehicles and make more money, if we just want to call that out right now. But if you look right across the sector, the frustration, if you're even selling petrol or diesel or EV cars, is there has been no continuity of policy. And these OEMs, no matter what you're selling, they are ordering their stock 12 months in advance. So when you talk to the likes of a BYD, they've got 15 new brands they were looking to bring in next year. And if you look at our policies compared to Australia, quite frankly, it's embarrassing. And if you're the likes of a EV manufacturer, we're not going to see the range in New Zealand. We're going to see price increases. And so they will invest in other markets. And it's not just the EVs. It's actually, when you think about it, the government made a commitment to 10,000 chargers by 2030. We've got about 1,400 in the ground. But we've seen the likes of our big infrastructure players like Morrison's invest millions into France, 8,000 chargers. Last week, we also saw BlackRock invest millions into the US to deliver chargers there. So we're not seeing those big infrastructure businesses want to invest in this country, and that we are falling so far behind, which is so stupid. When you look at EVs, it's the cheapest fuel source for your car. It's the cheapest car to run with 20 moving parts in an engine, and we have homegrown, electricity to fuel them. It should be an economic no-brainer. But anyway, sorry. I'll let you ask a question, Bernard. I'm fired up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find fascinating about this area is that there's very much a system of things that could accelerate our shift into renewable energy that is simply cheaper. I mean, you're not doing it for climate reasons. You're not doing it for brand reasons. You're doing it because it's financially cheaper to not only own an electric car instead of a diesel or petrol car, but also start to do some things like, for example, use your car as a type of battery, which you can then suck power down cheaply from the grid and store, or store solar power from your roof, then start to, sell your solar generated electricity to others in a virtual smart grid. You're starting to, get a whole bunch of things together using the immense scale and low cost of those Chinese-made batteries and cars and panels to actually take the economy into a much lower cost a place where we're not having to spend so much of our foreign exchange on fossil fuels, let alone incur the risk that a couple of tankers don't turn up one month and we suddenly run out of diesel. Can you give us a sense of that system-wide opportunity that we're missing out on?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like you're doing my job for me, Bernard.
Well, he does
when you
drive a
think-
Leaf, Kirsten, so it's not...
Brilliant. I know, it's awesome. If you think about the economic opportunity here, if we spend $8 to $9 billion a year paying Malaysia and Singapore to import fossil fuels, 100% of that leaves our economy. If you think about what it costs to power an EV, if you're charging your Leaf overnight, Bernard, it's going to cost you around $3 per 100 kilometres. If you're filling up your petrol car, like your 6.9 litre, it's going to cost you around $20. And so the economic impact is massive. And I had some feedback this week that, EVs, this is so hard for low socioeconomic New Zealand, and they're absolutely right. Yes, you can buy a fantastic Leaf on Trade Me for under $5,000, which is great. But what we need to see is those second, third, fourth, fifth-hand cars coming into the market. And when you've seen the government has recently moved away from mandating with their procurement rules on EVs. So they've loosened the rope there so our government departments don't actually have to buy electric vehicles anymore. And then, so we're not seeing that influx from the government buying them. Thank goodness we have corporate New Zealand buying them, because this is 60% of our new cars are bought by businesses. So if we're not creating that second, third, fourth hand market, it's just going to take us so long to transition. And whilst Australia have got more EVs on the ground, we used to be a leader, but now we're turning into a laggard. Sorry, that was another rant from me.
It was a pause.
Yeah.
No, it was a pause.
That's good.
No, go right ahead, Ben.
Kirsten, I'm curious though about. I've wondered in the last 6 months or so why I haven't heard much from what I'd call corporate New Zealand about this sliding, the backsliding in our various climate policies that's going on. So obviously the clean car discount is the most recent example, but we've seen many of them, and we've seen just this week we got the fourth fossil of the year award. The New Zealand was awarded the one of the worst climate change policy awards at the COP30. We've seen all sorts of things that are happening that seem to go backwards. For example, the government seems absolutely determined to spend hundreds of millions, if not billions, on an LNG terminal to bring in gas to replace some of the gas that's not being generated by our own gas fields. Why isn't corporate New Zealand being more public and saying what they really think? It's great that you are, but I don't hear that many comments that are direct and simple from, the big end of town, if you like.
I guess I can't speak for the big end of town, but we've certainly seen members join, like Fonterra and New Zealand Post, that are actually sincerely interested in decarbonising. And you think about that report that AOTS Circle did by Chapman Tripp, 80% of our exporters are dealing with countries and companies where there is mandatory or impending climate disclosures. So they don't have the liberty to flip-flop like a government. They have to go, if we want to be a successful trading business, and say likes of Fonterra with Danone and Nestle that said, if you want to do business with us, you need to sincerely decarbonise. But for me, I went to the Climate Leaders Coalition this breakfast this morning, and it was heartening to see Malcolm Johns from Genesis stand up in his opening address saying, governments will come and go, but we need to be responsible for sweeping our own floor. And I love that. I thought that was great. Yeah.
Just finally, Kirsten, there might be some who would argue, why should the government get involved in here at all? If you're right about the onwardly falling costs of electric vehicles, not just to run, but to own, we don't have to do anything. We just have to wait for a little bit, and then BYD and the rest will start cutting the cost of price of cars to below the price of petrol and diesel cars. If it's so inevitable that we're all going to be driving these things, it's going to happen anyway, and taxpayers won't have to, fork out any money. Just the natural economics of it will win. What do you think of that argument?
I think it's great to look at a country like Norway. They started in 1990 with heavy incentives and heavy policies, and now it's around 90% of new car sales are electric. But out of their total fleet, only about 35% of their total fleet is now electric, and they started in 1990. So that shows how long it takes. When you look at the New Zealand fleet, we have one of the oldest in the OECD. We have the oldest, dirtiest, unsafe vehicles on our road. We're in the top 5, embarrassingly, to go with our other awards. So it just shows the time it takes to transition a fleet, but also, to my other point, just the economic opportunity to put more money in the back pocket of Kiwis. Electric vehicles would do that. And also, to your earlier point, this isn't just about transport. This is about an energy transition, because these are batteries on wheels, and they are going to help save money on an energy perspective as well. And that's the exciting opportunity around EVs. This isn't environmental, transport issue. This is actually a financial economic opportunity for a country that creates 86% renewable energy, and that could save this country billions. And I'm not even starting on the health costs or the 2,000 people that die each year in New Zealand directly related to transport emissions. That whole social environmental piece, I'm just putting that aside, and just from a pure economic lens, this absolutely makes sense for this country.
Kirsten Corsten, the chair of Drive Electric, thank you so much for coming onto the Hoon.
Thank you, Kirsten. That's really brilliant. Thank you. And,
no worries. Have a good night, guys.
And Bernard, you want to do a soliloquy, but first let me just tell you, because Artie Farty mentioned it in the chat. Your When the Facts Change podcast has won a gold award as the best sponsored podcast in the New Zealand Podcast Awards, which is interesting given that it's no longer with us, because it was sponsored by Kiwi Bank and the sponsorship went. So maybe you can use that as leverage to get it back, or that we get enormous sponsorship for the which did not appear this year in the
but did last year.
Yes, absolutely. I'm still surprised that big hairy men one does it, because I just find they sort of yell at each other. But anyway, it's more popular than us. So
maybe we need to yell at each other more, Peter.
I don't think that's a very good idea. But you want to do a little soliloquy, because was it going to be about the Boston Consulting Group? This report that we read today from Champfy about New Zealand reaching 95% renewables. Is that what your soliloquy was about? Or is that just the intro into your soliloquy?
That's the intro into the soliloquy. Okay. I mean, partly we covered it in the discussion with Kirsten, which is that a huge opportunity is being left on the table by a supposedly business-friendly government that's all about the cost of living. This is the irony in this situation, is that Chris Bishop stood up on Monday and said, this is all about the cost of living and reducing the cost of living by, not imposing government fees and charges. When actually, if you just widen your lens and go a bit deeper in how you think, this is an opportunity to grab hold of, and it may not last forever, an opportunity to grab hold of enormous, and we're talking just mountains of incredibly cheap solar panels, batteries, and EVs from the world's most, from history's biggest shift in our, industrial world, which is the enormous growth of China. China had literally a 10-year plan, which they launched 10 years ago, to become the world leader in electric vehicles, electric batteries, electric panels. And they are, because the government had a vision and did it. Now, we don't like Marxist communist governments, and it's often used as an epithet. But actually, they planned, and they had a whole bunch of privately owned and government-owned businesses like BYD that have done extraordinary things. And that Chinese government subsidy is there for the taking. And we have just done a deal, actually. The government's other announcement this week on transport was to buy 2 ferries from a Chinese shipyard, which, by the way, is actually a dedicated Chinese military shipyard.
Excellent.
And I do wonder whether we've spoken to our Five Eyes partners about putting the future of one of the key parts of our national infrastructure into technology which was designed and built and, in theory, particularly because it will be, of course, connected to the internet, controlled. There are all sorts of decisions being made all over the world to not put Chinese technology into the heart of your national infrastructure, simply because of the fears about cyber attacks and others. But it was done in theory to save money. Why don't we use those connections to those Chinese factories to save money and not just do that, but to reduce our reliance on having to spend $8 billion a year on fossil fuels? This for me is one of these great frustrations and ironies that a government that talks a lot about saving money actually does things that save it money in the next 3 seconds, but cost it so much more in the next 3 years. And there's nothing more obvious than that. And for example, its proud announcement this week that it was imprisoning more New Zealanders than it ever has. The Prime Minister said that this was a good thing and he didn't care how much it cost. Yet at the same time, the government was very proudly announcing that it no longer had a single person in emergency homelessness care in a motel in Rotorua, while at the same time...
Where do you think they'll go, Bernard?
Well, we know where they...
Have they been found social housing in Kayangora?
No, they've been found.
So.
They've been found in the doorways of shops and tourist facilities in Rotorua, and they're being found in A&E departments and in beds that are costing thousands of dollars a night, or they're ending up in prison, where it costs $172,000 a year to have people in prison. There's a part of me that just wants to talk very loudly at the government to say, seriously, dudes,
WTF?
if you care about costs of living and about reducing government deficits and borrowing, think a bit longer than the next news cycle, if there is such a thing as a news cycle.
And that would require
anymore.
Principles, Bernard, and as someone said, I've got principles, and if you don't like those, I've got others.
Yes,
I think it was Mark
right.
Twain.
Yeah.
Or was it Karl Marx? Karl Marx or Groucho? Or
Well,
Harpo? Was it Harpo
irony,
Marx?
The irony here is that the Marxist approach to running an economy is the most successful in the world right now. And I'm not suggesting that we take a Marxist approach to anything, and I'm certainly not unaware of the awfulness and dangers of a communist-run dictatorship. But they are just killing it in the world of sort of public opinion and competent governance.
So next week, Venezuela, Bernard. Next week we'll do our soliloquy on Venezuela. Shall I do a little skateboarding dog, which
Yes,
is
please.
another journalistic one? And I do want to mention, because we talk about this a little bit, but this is the kind of shit that we'll get when everybody bitches and complains about TVNZ and RNZ. And GB News, which is a ludicrously right-wing, comically right-wing British channel, the British Fox News, interviewed Trump this week, and it sounded like something from North Korea. Bev Turner said that one of her last questions to Donald Trump, having talked to him about how lovely his children were, does it ever occur to you how much the role is like being a father, being president? But the clincher was talking to him in the Oval Office in Washington. She said, it feels much safer here than London. And the chances of being murdered in London and DC are 26 times higher than being murdered in London. So when you complain about, TVNZ and RNZ and me and Bernard being a bunch of lefties, just careful what you wish for. Thank you, Bernard, and thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you very much.
And
That's
listening
been
tomorrow.
yes, and that's been another episode of the Hoon on the
And
Kaka.
congratulations to Bernard on his gold award.
Fantastic. Yes.
Go Bernard.
Onwards and upwards. Ka